Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about a moment that could redefine the future of Eastern Europe, a moment many thought would never come. For decades, Belarus has been seen as one of the most tightly controlled states in the region, ruled with an iron grip by President Alexander Lukashenko. But now a dramatic and historic shift appears to be unfolding as signs emerge that the Belarusian army may be turning against the very leader it once served without question. This is not just another political rumor or isolated protest. If true, it represents a turning point that could shake the foundations of Belarusian power and alter the balance of influence in the region. To understand why this moment matters so much, we need to look at the role the army has played in Belarus since Lukashenko came to power in 1994. For nearly 3 decades, the military has been one of the key pillars supporting his rule. While the police and internal security forces were often the most visible tools of repression during protests, the army stood in the background as the ultimate guarantor of state power. Its loyalty was assumed, rarely questioned, and carefully cultivated through privileges, control, and close ties to Russia. The idea that this institution could turn against Lukashenko would have sounded almost impossible just a few years ago. Belarus has long been described as Europe's last dictatorship, but that label does not fully capture the complexity of the system Lukashenko built. His rule relied on a balance of fear, patronage, and stability. Many Belarusians tolerated the lack of political freedom in exchange for predictable lives, steady employment, and avoidance of the chaos seen in other post-Soviet states. The army, like other state institutions, was integrated into this system. Officers were trained to see loyalty to the president as loyalty to the state itself. Any challenge to Lukashenko was framed as a threat to national security, foreign-backed chaos, or even war. The cracks in this system became visible during the mass protests following the disputed 2020 presidential election. Millions of Belarusians took to the streets, convinced the vote had been stolen. The world watched as riot police brutally dispersed demonstrations, arrested thousands, and crushed dissent. During this period, the army largely stayed out of sight. Its absence was not neutrality, but a strategic choice. Lukashenko relied on internal security forces while keeping the army as a reserve, a silent threat that never needed to be used openly. Yet even then, subtle signs of unease appeared, including resignations, quiet statements from retired officers, and reports of low morale. Since 2020, the situation inside Belarus has continued to deteriorate. International sanctions have hit the economy, isolation has deepened, and dependence on Russia has grown stronger than ever. Many within the military have watched as Belarus lost more of its sovereignty, becoming increasingly tied to Moscow's strategic interests. Joint exercises, Russian troops stationed on Belarusian soil, and the use of Belarus as a launchpad during the war in Ukraine have raised uncomfortable questions for Belarusian officers. Are they defending their own country, or are they serving as an extension of Russian power? This question is crucial to understanding why parts of the army may now be reconsidering their loyalty. Soldiers and officers are not immune to economic hardship, political pressure, or moral dilemmas. They have families, personal beliefs, and a sense of national identity. As the war in Ukraine drags on and Russia faces mounting costs, the risks for Belarus increase. Many in the military fear being dragged directly into a conflict that most Belarusians do not support. Being ordered to fight or suppress their own people would cross a line that even years of indoctrination may not erase. Reports suggesting that the Belarusian army is turning against Lukashenko vary in detail, but they share common themes. These include growing resistance to orders, internal disagreements among senior officers, and increased surveillance and purges within the military itself. Lukashenko's response to these rumors has been telling. he has repeatedly warned of betrayal, internal enemies, and foreign plots. Such language often signals insecurity rather than strength. Leaders confident in their control do not publicly fear their own armies. Another important factor is generational change within the military. Younger officers and soldiers grew up in a different Belarus. They are more connected to the outside world through the internet, social media, and personal networks. They have seen alternative political systems, heard different narratives, and questioned official propaganda. While they may still serve under strict discipline, their world view is not identical to that of older commanders shaped by the Soviet era. This generational shift can quietly transform institutions long before any visible rebellion occurs. The role of Russia cannot be ignored in this unfolding story. Lukashenko's survival since 2020 has depended heavily on Moscow's support. Financial aid, political backing, and security guarantees have kept him in power, but this reliance comes at a price. Many Belarusian officers resent the perception that their country has become a satellite state. They are trained to defend Belarus, not to surrender its autonomy. If the army believes Lukashenko is sacrificing national sovereignty to stay in power, that belief could become a powerful motivator for resistance. At the same time, turning against a long-standing leader is an extremely dangerous move. The Belarusian security apparatus is extensive, and loyalty is constantly monitored. Any sign of dissent within the military can lead to arrest, dismissal, or worse. This means that if opposition within the army exists, it is likely cautious, fragmented, and deeply underground. Rather than a sudden coup, the shift may take the form of hesitation, refusal to act, or quiet non-compliance at critical moments. History shows that when armies stop following orders, regimes can collapse faster than anyone expects. From Eastern Europe in 1989 to more recent uprisings around the world, the loyalty of the military often determines whether protests succeed or fail. In Belarus, the people have already demonstrated their willingness to resist. What they lacked in 2020 was support from powerful institutions. If that equation changes even slightly, the consequences could be dramatic. It is also important to consider the psychological pressure on Lukashenko himself. Ruling through fear requires constant vigilance. The more a leader suspects betrayal, the more repression increases. This can create a vicious cycle where loyalty erodes further as trust disappears. Purges, loyalty tests, and harsh punishments may temporarily enforce obedience, but they also deepen resentment. Within the army, this dynamic can be especially dangerous, as it undermines cohesion and professionalism. For ordinary Belarusians, the idea of the army turning against Lukashenko inspires both hope and fear. Hope because it suggests the possibility of change without massive bloodshed. Fear because any confrontation involving armed forces carries the risk of violence and instability. The memory of conflicts in other post-Soviet states serves as a warning of how quickly things can spiral out of control. Internationally, the implications are just as significant. A shift within the Belarusian army would send shockwaves through neighboring countries and beyond. NATO members closely watch Belarus due to its strategic location. Ukraine sees Belarus as both a potential threat and a possible weak link in Russia's regional strategy. If the Belarusian military refuses to fully align with Moscow's objectives, it could complicate Russia's plans and alter the course of the wider conflict. However, it is crucial to approach these developments with caution. Authoritarian systems are opaque by nature. Information is tightly controlled. Rumors spread easily, and propaganda distorts reality on all sides. Not every report of dissent is accurate, and not every sign of tension leads to open rebellion. Lukashenko has survived many crises by adapting, repressing, and out-maneuvering his opponents. Underestimating his ability to cling to power would be a mistake. Still, something fundamental appears to be changing. The language used by officials, the increased militarization of society, and the visible anxiety at the top all point to a regime under strain. The army, once a silent and unquestioned pillar, is now at the center of speculation. Whether this leads to a decisive break or a prolonged standoff remains to be seen. If the Belarusian army ultimately chooses the nation over the leader, it would mark the end of an era. Lukashenko's rule has shaped an entire generation, and its collapse would open a period of uncertainty and opportunity. The challenge would then be building new institutions, restoring trust, and defining Belarus's place in the world. That path would be difficult, but many believe it would finally allow Belarusians to decide their own future. For now, Belarus stands at a crossroads. The balance between fear and courage, obedience and conscience is shifting. The army's choices in the coming months could determine whether this historic moment becomes a footnote or a turning point remembered for generations. What is clear is that the idea of absolute loyalty is fading, replaced by questions that can no longer be silenced. As events continue to unfold, one thing is certain: Belarus is no longer frozen in time. The possibility that the army may turn against Lukashenko signals that even the strongest authoritarian systems are vulnerable when they lose the confidence of those entrusted with defending state. The world is watching closely, and history may be writing a new chapter right before our eyes.